Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the owner of Escape Pod Comics on Long Island in New York, Huntington in specific. It's Menachem Luchins. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So we're going to get into where comics are right now, because that's, I mean, there's a perpetual conversation about all this stuff that's happening. Understandably, it's a really weird time, but I want to...
Honestly, I've got bullet point ready.
Okay. Well, before we get into that, though, I want to start with your origin story, because I love the fact that you started out as a burnt out high school teacher, which is really like, I mean... I think that when you look at comic shop owners, most of the time it's because it's like a passion project. It's not like you go in there because you have designs on being rich. You have designs on wanting to like fulfill a passion of yours. Why did you want to get into like owning and operating a comic shop?
So yeah, I mean, I've now told this story. I feel like I grew up with the legend Stan Lee said about seeing a spider crawling a web, thinking, what if there was a hero who was like that, but people didn't like him, like they don't like spiders.
I don't like spiders, but I love Spider-Man.
And I found out later that like it's not what he said throughout the 60s. It was like the 70s and on, to the point where he believed it, but it wasn't what he used to say. I've now said the origin story of this that I don't even know if it's true anymore. It's just like become the origin story. I always wanted to eventually have a bookstore of some kind. In high school literature teacher, like kind of pathetic. And yeah, I got really burnt out teaching. I wasn't trying to do anything fancy as a teacher. There's just an issue within the way the New York school system works with bureaucratic responsibility for who's responsible for what, which is fine up to a point where like I can't teach the things that I'm supposed to teach, and I can't teach the things that I want to teach. I just have to teach whatever's in front of me. Like it just became, again, this is very much my perspective as falling into depression. So it's obviously not the way the system works for everybody. It really just, I was just literally, I was staying in bed, not going to work for multiple days. And I'm like, what's going to get me out of this bed? Like what, what's going to, and about a year before then, I had decided, I had decided to reread all of Cerebus with all the letters, columns, and back matter. And in the back matter was Mark and Stephen's manifesto for page 45 in Nottingham, England, what I always call the greatest comic shop in the world, about what a comic shop should be. And this is like 1996.
When you read it, or when it was written?
No, when this was published.
Okay.
When they opened their store. I'm like, wait, this store's existed since 1996? So in that year, I dived into the internet and found page 45 and found all these really great comic shops. And I had been going for a while before that to Rocket Ship in Brooklyn. Alex Cox was CBLDF on the CBLDF board or some position there. He just left for, I think, IDW. But he had a comic shop in Brooklyn that was what page 45 talked about, and it had closed. It had just rent drove them out. And it wasn't even they weren't doing well. It was just their landlord doubled their rent because it was in the Park Slope area. So I kept going back to that in my depression. Like, I want Rocket Ship. Like, I want to do that. And I'm tired of trying to force teenagers to think analytically, just so that they'll eventually find things that they love that drive them. I just want to give people that thing that they love that drives them straight. What do I know enough about? At the time I thought I knew enough about. And really, like I said, I've always been, I would talk to people who worked in comic shops, and the things they didn't know blew my mind. It was like, well, what's the diamond order number? And they're like, what are you saying? And I'm like, well, what's the diamond order number? Because then I can know how long ago it came out, and maybe, and they're like, what are you talking about? And I read up. I recently, when Tom Spurgeon passed, I talked about reading up on his website, what a comic shop should be. It's a fantastic essay. I definitely recommend reading it. It has a list of criteria at the bottom, which I very much took to heart. Luckily, page 45 and Rocket Ship both fit that criteria very well already. And I realized that I needed a gigantic change. I needed to completely reinvent what I wanted to do with myself to bring myself, out of where I was. And that's where Escape Pod came from.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like looking at the history of Escape Pod and kind of what you do and everything. I think one of the interesting things is like, first off, like you look at the Kickstarter you did initially to right. Like you wanted to have an actual like you wanted to kind of mix education into it. It was like kind of pairing.
That was because it was the early days of Kickstarter.
Right.
And I couldn't kickstart something to just do a store. It had to have an educational aspect.
Oh, it was a back door.
It was a back door, but I get a lot of credit for that.
Yeah. I mean, it makes you look really great.
That's what I would have used the money for.
Sure.
I factored in money for that kind of store. For a space that would double the space I have, that would have had room for classes and things.
But I mean, even if that was a back door, I feel like that is still reflected in what your shop is. Because near as I can tell, like when you read about what Escape Pod is, I've never been to your shop. But I mean, like talking to friends that have been there, looking at your shop, everything like that. You don't sell pops. You don't really. You just really have like a pure comic. Like you're really purely focused on comics in a way that most shops aren't.
And right, and that's definitely we keep that aspect. But again, we're getting into already where comics are.
Right.
So if you want, we can jump.
I mean, free flowing, do it.
But really, the issue at hand is that there's three things. These are my bullet points.
Okay.
There's three things. There's comics. There's the comic market, and then there's the comic industry. Comics is webtoons, it's Gumroad, it's zines handed to you by a friend, it's Nancy, it's everything. Comics is everything. The comic market are newly published comics that go out through a retail channel. So that's going to cut back on things that are only sold at conventions. But if John Porcellino sells it for you after he picks it up, that counts, right? So it's slightly smaller. Basically the same. Then there's the comic industry, which is this infinitesimal, this tiny little caterpillar that thought it was once a butterfly hanging on to the bottom of those other two things.
Right.
And it's such a long story, and it's so frustrating to go over every time I talk about it, but it's so important that this is part of why I became an educator of comics, because I just people are astounded by my shop, but we literally pre-talking mentioned at least 4 shops that are like that.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing is that they are in a market where they are not other. Big Bang's fantastic example. Why would Big Bang sell pops? Those guys are comic crazies.
They do sell like really big figures though, like really big ass figures.
That's what I'm saying. I can see that. That's a prestige thing. You've got your nice figures. Look, we've got a bunch of Bowens that someone gave us to sell on consignment. And we've got the last 8 left that no one likes the prices of. But they look really nice.
Yeah.
Old Magneto Bowen standing up. We don't mind. I can totally get that. But basically, they're a comic shop. They want to help people with comic books.
Right.
But they have pops. Because who else is going to get the sort of shipments of pops that they can get with their discounts, with everything in Dublin, and get the specialty stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Their customers are already coming there. They'll already buy pops.
Right.
That's their customer base. My radical idea is that my customer base is everyone.
Mm-hmm. You're insane. You're insane.
Well,
you're a crazy person.
It's like someone once said to me, well, but there are people who won't read comic books. And I'm like, sure, but there's no one who can't read a comic book unless they're illiterate, dyslexic, and certain issues with sensory perception. And they're like, yeah, but they're not going to. And I'm like, well, not with that attitude.
Right.
And that's the comic industry.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, I mean, it's interesting because it's like you described yourself. I actually, believe it or not, have the word radical written down into my questions. That was a word I was going to use later. But it is fascinating how the idea that you have, the idea that focusing on comics is a narrow idea, like a narrow view, given the fact that it's that'd be like going to a movie theater and being like, why don't you sell pop figures of your movies? And you're like...
I'll give you one better. I'll give you... The way comic shops are run right now, in general, overall, is on a belief that was put in place 15 or 20 years ago post the implosion.
Right.
Only certain people are going to come here. We need to sell to those certain people and get every penny we can out of them. The certain people has grown because nerds have grown.
Mm-hmm.
But people are going to come here and they're going to want stuff with superheroes, stuff with the kind of stories they see on TV and movies, and stuff that connects both of them.
Right.
They're going to want science fiction, fantasy, adventure. They're going to want, and then there's going to be a small group of those people who really know comics, and they're going to want slightly more esoteric stuff and more interesting things, but they're not going to mind those guys.
Right.
Who are coming there for the pops or whatever. Again, you're looking at why would I, a parent with an 11-year-old, let's say, picking one of my kids at random. No, you know what? I'll pick my 7-year-old. He's a much better example. Why would I, with my 7-year-old, want to walk into a store to pick up Dogman for him that has toys all over the place?
I don't know, because you want to buy him a toy also? I don't know.
But do I?
I don't know.
Especially when I'm already shopping at Target and they have Dogman.
Yeah, that's
I'm picking up diapers for my baby. Oh, here's that Dogman my kid wants.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think about Pops too, and I don't mean to single out Pops. I literally have like 2 Pops like within arm's reach of me. But I mean, the thing is
I'm
like
in the basement right now. But yes, we have Pops.
I mean, the thing is there's like from a sheer like economics.
Fort Reynard plushie.
Oh, there you go. So
yeah, I mean, pretty esoteric.
But I mean, there's like from a pure economics business standpoint, like that you mostly are looking for points of differentiation. And if like you're competing in a market where you go to like, I don't know, obviously you're not. I have to admit, I was going to go to Escape Pod when I visited New York this past for New York Comic Con. Then I realized that Long Island is not as close to New York City as I realized.
I have a lot of people who are like, well, you're in New York. It's different. You're in like the major urban area. And I'm like, I'm in a less urban area than 2/3 of the California, Texas. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Those stores are in major cities.
But I mean, here's the thing. I think one of the things, like you look at, like, let's talk about Big Bang again. Like Big Bang, when you go to that shop, there's 2 things that happen. One, like you go in there and it's just comics. Oh, it's not just comics, but it's mostly just comics. And you go in there and that allows 2 things. One, it's like, you can go there and you can find a wide mix of comics you probably wouldn't find elsewhere. And second off, when you go there, the people are fundamentally built to know a lot about one thing instead of having to know a little bit about a lot of things.
Well, so that's what I'm saying. That's why we got to go into the history of this, because I think what we talk about when we say the issues with comic shops, it's absurd to discuss them as issues. They're
fundamentally built into the idea
traits that no longer they're vestigial tales left over from a time where I have kids come into the store and they're like, do you have Flash 173? And I'm like, Flash 173, Series 2, Barry Allen Flash. It's the first time we're so-and-so, because they have Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm.
The kid who used to be the know-it-all, who came to the comic shop to talk to the other know-it-alls, gone.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many parts of the comic market.
I was that kid.
Yeah, fine. Yeah, absolutely. My brother was. There's so many parts of that comic market that are literally just dead in the water. Those who read Marvel comics in the 90s because they were cool, they just looked cool and they're fun, they're seeing the movies.
Mm-hmm.
And they could be persuaded to go into a comic book store, but it has to appeal to a 17-year-old boy.
Right.
And a lot of the things that used to appeal to a 17-year-old boy that you're still selling in your comic shop doesn't anymore.
Right.
There's so many things going on when we talk about factors that, if you look at stores that are open in the last 8 or 9 years, these things don't exist. They don't have them.
Right.
They don't have so many of these problems and so many of these issues just because that's not where the retail market is nowadays. The retail market is, like you said, is expert knowledge.
Right.
That's the retail market. That's all that exists in the world.
Right.
As far as I'm concerned, with the internet, all that exists as a true retail commodity is better limited product and expert knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Those are your only 2 real commodities left.
Yeah. I mean, that's like, otherwise you probably just buy stuff on the internet. And
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, okay. So going back to the beginning really quick, I do want to ask about, I mean, you said it, like comics retail is like heavily, it's like post distributor wars. There was like basically like the ones who survived are the ones who kind of defined what comics retail was and to a certain degree is today. I mean, well, continuing forward from that, I am curious, like when you were first putting Escape Pod together, did you look at what other shops were doing, or did you really like, I want to do something different, I want to strike out on my own?
I contacted Alex of Rocket Ship right away.
Right.
He was busy at the CBLDF. He hadn't like announced his thing, but he was moving to the West Coast. Didn't he was like, good luck.
Yeah.
But Stephen at Page 45 was humongously helpful. He was exceptionally helpful. The Tom and Amy of Bergen Street Comics.
Oh yeah.
They were in operation. They gave me some solid advice. But I also knew that, though both of those stores that I mentioned have multiple distribution streams, I also knew specifically, and this was part of my plan, I opened 2.5 miles from a really traditional superhero DC Marvel heavy store, so I didn't have to have that stuff. I wasn't in competition with this store for that. The store would still be going, well, not now probably, but there was a fire. I have nothing to do with it.
You like them. They helped.
No, they actually came back after the fire, but the owner's health, whatever. But they were. I loved it. People came in. They go, you don't have the new Batman? And I'm like, it's 2 miles up. He gets the 1 in 500 coverage. He'll have Batman.
Wait, really quick. So do you just blanket not have new single issues?
No, this when I first opened, and
okay.
And honestly, it's a good chance I won't have the new Batman Sunday after it comes out.
Mm-hmm.
But
you order for who
I order for what
is.
I'm selling. Again, Tom Rosinski's come around to this. You know what I mean? Like I had someone tell me, you really saw what was coming. And I'm like, no, I went where I thought it would be good.
Right.
And some of it's come that way. You know what I mean? Like I really, not foresight or brilliance. It was, who am I selling these single issues to? No one. No one's buying these single issues. Our first year, we have a tradition, actually carried on from an old comic shop in Manhattan, Cosmic Comics. It's on 20th Street. They used to have a Christmas sale. December 25th, they were open, biggest sale of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided that I used to love going as a little Jewish kid, going on Christmas to the store. And I carried it on. Actually, the owner and his son come every year of Cosmic. They come every year. I didn't even know they lived on Long Island, but they do. They came into my shop right before the first sale.
That's awesome.
And I was like, hey, we're having a sale. And they go, that's our store. We'll be there. So we have this sale. And my first year, I made all the recent back issues, which we already made $1 off cover price after 2 months on the $1. And someone bought the whole box.
That's wild.
200. Well, it was the year's most recent books.
Right.
Couldn't do that if I tried this year. This year in the Christmas sale, I made every single issue on the wall except for the new weeks half off. We're talking $1.50. I sold 4 issues.
Why? Just because your audience?
Because I'm not. Look, there's 3 things. One, no one's really buying single issues. It's bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
No one's buying single issues.
I have a very large stack to my right that says otherwise. However, I know what you're saying.
Mathematically.
Yeah.
Mathematically.
Right.
2, I'm known as a store that doesn't have that many single issues.
Right.
I don't get that single issue crowd.
Right.
3, the people coming to me for the sale are my regulars who more often prefer graphic novels or already picked up those single issues on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as insane as it sounds.
Well, it's a specialization thing, right? I mean, it's like, other shops are known as the single issue place that you go on Wednesday. And if you want I'm going to look to my left, like you want Skim by the Tamakis, like you would go to Escape Pod, or if you want.
So but see, this is where I'll get a little, raw with that attitude because it's bullshit also.
Okay.
Because you get every issue you want from me. You just have to order it in advance.
Mm. Sure.
We don't have what I'm saying. And I have loads of customers who do exactly that, and I have loads of customers who really aren't good at it. And I guess, and I put the stuff aside for them, and then they put it in after FOC.
Right.
Like every other comic shop in the world. That's why I'm talking about no one's buying comics. I'll get there in a second. That's what stores are doing when they're putting stuff on their shelf. It's the same. They're ordering for their holdless customers also. They get those holdless customers in the store by hosting card games. Supposedly, people buy comics after they play Magic games. Sorry. The people I know who've done it have not had success like that.
Right.
But again, that's that old logic from the late 90s.
I imagine, I mean, honestly, so I've been shopping at the same, I'm 36 years old. I've been shopping at the same comic shop since, I've been shopping at the same comic shop since I wasn't even buying comics. I was buying sports cards, and I was probably like 5 years old. And they sell sports cards still, and they sell games, and they sell Magic, and
none of the comic shops I shopped at when I was 5 years old are even open anymore.
Really? Well, I live in Alaska, so
right.
It is literally the only shop. So they have the market very well cornered.
Right. And you know what? And the fact that they stock Pops and everything imaginable is of course they do.
Yeah, because it's like they have that market cornered. But the thing about them is like, I think one of the big reasons why because like I have a poll list there. I keep it updated mostly because like I know too much about this stuff to not want to like respect my comic shop. But on top of that, though, I think a big part of the reason why they have as many poll list customers as they do is because of longevity, which is something you don't have. It's like it's ingrained into their experience.
Oh, sure. It definitely grows. But my point is, when I say that that's what shops are really doing anyway, is that we all know who's buying how many comics from us. The people who are talking about not knowing how many get shelf copies, now, obviously, in the pandemic, they don't know who's coming back. They don't know who's coming out. They won't even talk, or we can get into that later. But when they're talking about it on a given Wednesday, they're really saying that they don't really know their customer base and they're crap at what they're doing. Like, I'm sorry, if more people wanted these books from me, I'd get them. But I've specifically, just like you have, created an atmosphere for a certain kind of customer who wants to come in and buy certain things. And most of them, if I walk over to them and be like, this Marvel crossover you'll really like, there's a good chunk of them be like, really?
Yeah.
Really? Like when the trade's out, right? Like they just wouldn't even believe that I was telling them to read it.
Mm-hmm. But
there's a whole nother bunch that I could literally go over and be like, new Image series, I put it in your pull. And they're like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a balance. That is again, not a market. It's not, you can't survive as a store in a retail environment nowadays doing that. Like you could if you were me and you had one person working in the store, one person investor helping in the store occasionally, and great community helping at big events. Maybe. What's happening? Hold on one second. You guys can finish the last two. Sorry.
Is your, I imagine your product split leans really heavily towards graphic novels and trades, right?
You would think so, right?
Yeah, I definitely would think so.
But the simple fact is that the longer I'm in business, the longer I get single issue people who totally dig what I do. So the physical numbers are almost even with single issues on top. But when it comes and sales, single issue sales are almost even. I just make so much less profit on them.
Yeah.
I'm making so much less profit that the vast majority of my profit comes from graphic novels. And now this year, completely. From now this year, we mentioned Ngozi. So Ngozi's was supposed to do something in my local library.
Okay.
Didn't happen. I asked for book plates. I got book plates before anyone else. So I put them up on our website, flooded with orders.
Yeah.
Because Check Please lives on the internet. Check Please is an internet comic. So the person who makes the comic goes, support this store, you're going to get a picture that I drew.
This is the only place you could get it.
Right. It became an issue that they then made a website where you can buy it anywhere from one of the 7 stores that they were going to be in their tour.
Oh.
And she would mail you a book plate herself because it was.
You did the same thing with Bog Bodies, right?
So then we did it for Bog Bodies, and that's what we're going to keep doing through June or July. June, I haven't announced it yet, but it looks like it's going to be Fred Van Lent and Brian Dunleavy's next Action Presidents books.
Nice.
They were going to do some book plates for us, maybe, and we might even do a bundle for all 4 of them. The split, though, is very interesting because if you don't count our dollar back issues,
right,
single issues start plummeting. And that's the other thing. That's people talk about we have comics for everyone. I always try to push this. I got really upset. I was in this documentary, the My Comic Shop
Country, yeah.
Yeah. So I love the way I'm cut in that. I love the way I'm this like radical outlier, but really, I'm really pushing the same narrative as everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
In it. The comic shop's a community. The comic shop's a place. I didn't say any of that. My part about community is not in that movie. But the other stuff I said all supports all that. I do not like the term community, especially as it pertains to a store. My grocery store is not a community.
Oh, sure.
My mall is not a community. I want fucking comics. I don't want to be tested on who was the second Green Lantern to get their own independent ring not powered by Hal's. I don't want to have to look at statues. I just want comics. That's me personally. I know I'm an outlier. I don't think I'm a main person. But I believe that there's a lot of people who once presented with it are like, yeah, that's that. Yeah. But I want to present that to people who want to dig for back issues. I want to present that to people who want to get the latest issues, who want to come to events. I want to present that to as many people as possible who have an interest in comics.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think so in the documentary, that part is cut out, but I'm not against it. I think it's very true that the sort of comic shop that is catering to that tiny audience of 100,000 copies needs to be a community and needs to keep their customer part of their customer base.
But I mean, so this is funny. Like, I think that what you're saying is that you don't have a problem with community. You just have a problem with the insular communities.
Right. Well, no, it's more than that. I have a problem with the implication that by coming to us, you're one of us. You're part of us.
Okay.
There's no us. It's
right.
everyone.
But that's like exclusivity.
Yeah, I just don't. But I specifically believe that for all the good people mean when they talk about community, mm-hmm. there's an inherent exclusive vibe to that word.
Sure.
When I say our store is super open to the LGBT community,
mm-hmm.
that means there's people we're not open to.
Right.
So I don't say that.
You're just open to everybody.
Just open to everybody.
Yeah.
And it's weird. I don't have a paperclip in my window. I don't have,
What is the paperclip for?
That was the thing for a while for safe spaces.
Oh, okay. And now, a quick word from our sponsor. My friends at Phantom Comics are one of Washington, D.C.'s very best comic shops, and they're still open with a huge selection of graphic novels and comics for order via their Comic Hub shop at phantomcomics.com. They're doing mail order delivery right now, and as soon as it's possible, they'll be back for curbside pickup. That doesn't mean you have to be in Washington, D.C. to order, though. Browse their selection on their website and order today. Not sure what you want? They're hosting online events on Zoom that might be able to help on that, and you can find those on their Facebook event page. You can find them on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Phantom Comics, on their website at phantomcomics.com, where you can order their latest comics and graphic novels, or if you prefer to reach out directly, you can reach out to them directly at phantomhq at phantomcomics.com for special orders, personal shopping, and beyond. And now, back to the show. I do want to ask, I just have a couple more things, and I want to jump into like where we are during the coronavirus era.
Sure. Sorry.
There's two things.
I go up track.
No. It's totally cool. There's two things. You're going to know what I'm talking about as soon as I start talking about it. I read in the Comics Journal, you did an interview where you had this fits with everything we're talking about. You talked about how single issues are the biggest detriment to people getting into comics, but not because of single issues in terms of the form, but in how they're handled. Why do you think that? Is it? I guess I'm curious about that because I think I largely agree with you, but it really depends on what you mean by that because I find it to be a really fascinating idea.
So it's. I had a really great talk with a guy who used to work in a comic shop. Actually, he used to work at the comic shop 2 miles from me.
Right.
Before I ever opened, he worked there before. He really just does our trade-in. He has tons of old back issues. He's trying to put sets together, so he trades in. We do 2 for 1. You bring any issue as long as there's not a lot of doubles. you get 50 cents credit towards our dollar books.
Mm-hmm.
So he comes and does that a bunch. He's had me hold a few things. He picked up Hickman's X-Men for a little while.
Nice.
And then he fell behind, had me get all the rest of the issues. Again, we had on the shelf for months because it's a seller. And then read like 2 issues of X-Men. I was like, I don't want to keep up with this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm done with keeping up.
Right.
We had this talk, and we're talking about the state of comics.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm discussing comics, bullet point, the big one, comic. He's discussing comic industry, tiny little bottom part. I'm trying to have that conversation, though. I'm not trying to be more. I'm not trying to be extra. I'm not trying to be, well, what you really mean, though, is comic book. And he goes, but you see, they're not writing comics the way they're not writing what's going to happen to comics, to the format of the 24-page floppy. And I'm like, what do you mean the format of the 24-page floppy? Like I just said, they'll do digital. You know, I can see this happening. They'll do digital, and they'll come out in a book. He goes, no, that's not what I mean. He goes, if it's digital, it's not the same. And I'm like, what, to hold? He goes, no, the weight, the going, the anticipation, the way that the issues end, the cliffhanger part. And I'm like, but that's absurd. Go read a webtoon.
Right.
Go read a webtoon, and they hang exactly like a single. Go read any good web comic that takes breaks. I'm literally not reading Lore Olympus right now because I know she's got a gigantic break coming.
Yeah, she does.
And I want to give myself a few months of time to just binge some Lore Olympus.
Mm-hmm.
If every one of those issues ends where you're like, oh my God, what is going to happen next? She's great. It's a great comic. That's not going anywhere. He goes, they don't care to make the good kind of stories anymore. Then it became a whole thing about what the good kind of stories are. So I will tell you this. The single issue market is a detriment because the single issue market is trying to appease that guy.
Right.
The single issue market, single issues should be wonderful. There's a zillion ways they could be. I'm not even going to get into it. Like I could present 30 different ways to make single issue comics that work. They keep trying to recapture this dead market. There is a point somewhere 15 or 20 years ago where comics stalled and they didn't bring in new readers. The single issue market, the major universes, the top 5 companies, whatever you want to call it. They didn't. Scott Pilgrim brought new readers to comics.
Right.
You know, the respect R. Crumb and Dan Clowes was getting in the early 2000s brought people to comics. Zillions of things some of the movies brought people to comics.
Walking Dead brought people to comics.
Yeah, exactly. But the companies themselves and what they were doing and what was happening were trying to keep the old guard interested. They just stalled out. I really wasn't reading superhero comics at the time. I can't even tell you what most of them were. I read them in retrospect when I decided to get back into the selling. And they've literally just stumbled from doing that since. It's absurd. You have these rich worlds with amazing characters, with fantastic history, and they're just being fumbled. Not through the fault of the creative teams or even the editors, but in a belief that the audience that used to read these books would come back to them no, that audience has grown past this stuff.
Yeah.
They're gone.
Did you see the Maestro announcement this past week where Marvel's going to do a Maestro series? I'm just like, I find that to be a very excellent microcosm of like how they view the market, given the fact that this is like telling an unnecessary story about a character that was created 28 years ago and has barely featured ever since. And it's like, I don't know who that comic is for, but
that comic is for Marvel. Sure. I have a very bizarre theory.
Okay.
I've had for years. Marvel needs to print X number of books to get a certain printing discount.
Okay.
They have slipped past it at times, or have come close enough to slipping past it at times, that the infusion of number ones and variant covers are literally just to keep their shipping cost effective.
And the overshipping.
Yeah. To keep it, that's where all the overshipping is coming from.
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, like those numbers would totally math out. But I one thing I do want to mention is like, in a lot of ways, I actually agree with you. I love single issue comics. I still buy single issue comics. But one of the things the interesting thing is, and I wrote about this on Sketched, is like, to a certain degree, because publishers put such a disproportionate amount of weight on retailers, they constantly have to protect themselves, and so they keep reducing what they're going to order.
That's all from the same point of this. All comes this. We're living in a world that is post what I'm talking about. It's all the rolling effect of that. It's not even discussing. If your end goal is to get more people to read single issue comics, discussing what's been happening isn't even worth it.
Well, no, but what I'm saying though is like everything that they do is like basically like reducing the audience from where it was, and because they're constantly chasing the audience that was, instead of trying to find the audience that is or could be. And I think that's
and both companies have gotten much better in the last 2 years of the big two. They're doing it very different ways, and I try to support those ways, assuming they're making sellable stories. You know, Marvel's makes it difficult because they muddy their own waters with so much product.
Yeah.
So Marvel started after DC started. I mean, we can get into all sorts of Disney made Marvel licensed stuff to IDW.
Right, which is so weird.
It's money.
I know, but I don't understand why Marvel didn't do their own ink and zoom. Like, I don't understand.
That's what I'm saying. Ink and Zoom forced Marvel to take their already Ink and Zoom-like products and make the $12.99 manga size.
Which is great. Like, having Unbeatable Squirrel Girl's first 8 issues in the first volume for, like, $12.99 in digest size.
Are you kidding? I've sold out of it 3 times already.
I mean, like, yeah, like, those books, I just, like, I don't get why that. I know a lot of retailers hate digest books because they fit weirdly on shelves and all this stuff like that. But at the same time,
a lot of retailers hate having to do any work. The product's supposed to sell itself.
I didn't say nothing.
Gigantic, rabid audience that would be out there if only the publishers could get them. So that's what I'm saying. It's not worth talking about. What the goals that most retailers are looking for in their store don't exist. They're mirages.
Sure.
Of a past time.
But those digest books are interesting because, like, I'm glad they exist. I'm 100% glad they exist. I wish that they were promoted more. Like, I don't know where they're promoted. I mean,
because Marvel doesn't have to promote them. They have numbers at Target. I have customers who work at Target. Those books move like hotcakes.
I'm sure. Well, Squirrel Girl's fucking awesome. They don't need to promote them.
Fuck you and I. We know what a comic book store is.
Exactly. That's true.
Why are you telling us? We're not even promoting. Target just keeps buying them and putting them on the shelf.
Yeah.
Retailers upset that Walmart was selling DC comics of pretty lousy comics. So let's be honest. Not the new stuff. I
Batman Universe was really fun. That was a fun book.
I've skimmed through the new stuff. It looks great, but the reprints that are in there were like, you reprint 50 Superman stuff in that 50s things, it's gonna fly off the shelf.
Yeah.
Superman and the Burgers, Superman and the Super Baby with the spanking cover. Just put them in there.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
There's some really random stuff in there.
Really weird Batman stories that took place in the 70s, you know, a vampire Batman story that Doug Monack did before he and Kelly Jones did that. You know, just like it's stuff from the last 10 years that fit in the continuity we're currently selling.
Yeah.
Walmart, enjoy selling stuff to people who will literally buy less and less as the time goes on. But retailers made such a fuss about it, right, and such a big deal about it that it became a chase item.
Yeah.
And Walmart sold out of them to these lunatics, which killed the whole audience because where are the new readers coming from?
Yeah, collectability makes things really weird. But I do want to say, here's the fascinating thing to me about, like, DC, for example. DC is really fascinating to me because the main line to me may not even exist. I don't even care. Like, it's just like all those single issues, I just don't care. I like a lot of the DC Ink and Zoom stuff. Like, I love Harley Quinn Breaking Glass. It's incredible.
Steve Pro just like it
was unbelievable.
It's 3 times himself.
Yeah,
it's exceptional. I've loved those lines. I push those lines very heavily.
I like Black Label a lot, and
so Black Label. I love the intent of the original Black Label and a lot of books coming out through it.
Right, and then it got confusing when they did the age bands.
When they started doing the age bands, and I feel like if the original line didn't exist, Black Label and Ink and Zoom would fill that place easily.
Yeah.
Problem is that they exist. So this is very bizarre for me because I really don't give a shit about most of this stuff.
Yeah.
But I actually got kind of excited for, what's it called? G5?
5G.
5G.
Yeah.
When the timeline leaked.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I probably saw it 3 weeks afterwards.
Yeah.
But I'm like, wait a second. Bruce Wayne becomes Batman in 1973? right? He's born in 1943. Traditionally, he becomes Batman when he's 30. We get like Michael Lark drawing every other issue of a Warriors New York style Batman comic where the gadgets are like 80s tech because that's high tech.
Yeah, yeah.
And in Detective Comics, we get that. And in Batman, we get old Bruce Wayne training the next with a subheading of like 50-year-old Dick Grayson being a little pissed off that he's not
Yeah.
getting to be Batman, Jason Todd. Like you can do all this stuff with all of them, with all the history, with all the legacy. And I can't tell you. I had a writer from DC I was talking to, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't know. I'm moving into doing just my own projects there and not the main continuity stuff because it's just really." And I'm like, "Well, 5G." And this is before the deal left, and this is when this was what 5G was being aimed for.
Right.
He looks at me, he goes, "Really, you?" He goes, "I'm like, I'm a little excited." So I give him a help, and she goes, "That would be really cool." He goes, "That's not what it is." And the fact is that that's the problem. So I believe very heavily that branding and marketing, which is what DC moved under 2 years ago, right? Branding and marketing took them over, and that's what pushed Black Label. Ink and Zoom had already lined up 15 books. So they went, we're going all in on this one. They lined up another 15 books for the next year and made, right, very branded, very huge push. ALA, they announced it. And Black Label was going to be, we're going to do some mature stuff. Literally, the week the hangover happened was Batwang.
Mm-hmm.
The Black Label gets thrown into a whole tizzy, and that whole thing sort of gets messed over.
Yeah.
I believe now a year passes, branding and marketing, whatever her name is, who's in charge, or whoever she's got talking to DC, goes, look, we got this kids line. It's picking up. It's getting heat. Black Label, for all the controversy, people are excited by the announcements we put out. A year ago, they announced Miller. They announced that great Kelly Sue and Jimenez
Wonder Woman.
I'm still waiting on.
Yeah.
Yeah. We got heat. You guys you're literally just these peaks and curves of dying numbers. What do your customers want? What do they? And they said, and Dan DiDio fervently went, continuity.
Mm-hmm.
We have been, the only growth we've had has been Rebirth, has been we brought back Wally West. We showed that all of history's happened. Let's go all in. All of history did happen.
Mm-hmm.
We have 80 stories, 80 years of DC history. It happened.
Yeah.
And I literally went, Bob Harris, again, or whoever makes it, went, all right, last try. Fine, go for it.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened after that.
I mean, pandemic happened.
But that's what I mean is that he's not wrong. But part of the thing that makes Ink and Zoom so great are these worlds that have a touch more history. You feel like they've been built on, you go to what started Ink and Zoom, which is Shea Fontana's incredible work. Superhero. And she talks about her notes from Mike Carlin on DC continuity history.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the woman did the work. And that's sort of become a go-to in these books. These books don't just flippantly throw stuff out. The Green Lantern book, that Vietnamese grandma is from a GL Corps one-shot.
Mm-hmm.
Same name. Because why not?
Right. Well, I mean, that's because it's using continuity for what it's supposed to be, which is like color to the world, as opposed to like defining literally everything.
And the simple fact is that the sort of person who wants that story is very, very small when it comes to wanting that story in a non-collectible way that they'll pay for.
Right.
Because there are 2 million people checking out pirated comics. You've got to be, you're talking out your ass if you think 2 million people. Look, Outer Darkness, right? We both love Outer Darkness. Outer Darkness is exceptional. It's amazing. So after this whole thing about this website, I think Jim Zub put up the numbers of who's reading it.
Oh, wait, which one are you referring to?
Some comic
when he did Skull Kickers?
What?
Well, are you talking
Zub?
about when Zub did Skull
No,
Kickers online?
recently, very, very recently.
Oh, I
He
missed
put
it.
numbers of, so maybe he was just involved in a longer
Or maybe it was
conversation.
just Reddit. Was it the Reddit thing where it was like
Yeah, right,
1.2
think about how
million
many
people are on
people
there?
read those. Yeah. So Layman, right, exactly. Layman was like, I don't think that's how numbers work.
No, it isn't.
And then someone, I think it was even what's it though, the new bleeding cool, what's his face? Terror.
Oh, dude, terror.
Someone broke down just how websites work and how they count numbers.
Yeah.
So
I will
Layman
say
put up
that Jude's breakdown of websites was definitely written by somebody who doesn't work in online media. But
yeah,
at the same time, it's definitely not how numbers work. I mean, it's
right,
just like
how numbers work. So Layman said, according to that, it makes me feel a lot more comfortable. Like he said, looking at, thinking about it that way. Because the fact is, you and I love Out of Darkness. Out of Darkness is probably one of the best single issue comics coming out right
it's fantastic. I mean, I feel bad that I waited as long to read it as I did.
I have a customer who I have been weaning off of single issues for 5 or 6 years on his own request, and it's never taken.
That is a really hilarious thing. I mean, that sounds like you're talking about somebody you're giving methadone to or something.
I have a customer who basically went from a $60 a week habit to almost never buying comics. I'm proud of that because he hated what he was buying at the end.
And I always find that really fascinating. I mean, like that's like I don't know. There's a really fascinating psychosis element to single issue buyers that I mean, I'm one of them. So I guess I'm self-diagnosing perhaps.
Because it counts as a business expense, my copies that I get.
Yeah. And it was research for me. I just write that off. I'm just kidding. I don't actually write it off. Don't come at me, IRS. Calm down. Okay, wait. So I want to jump forward because we got to talk about the coronavirus stuff before we go. I'm going to color it with another question that I had. You speaking of renegade natures or your radical natures, you may or may not have handed out an anonymous pamphlet at Comics Pro where you talked about how the direct market as we know it is dead and that retailers are the ones that killed it. And I don't want to I can link to that in the post for this so people can go and read it if they want, but I do want to talk about how that's shifted because of the coronavirus era, because if retailers didn't kill it, the pandemic sure as hell is trying.
Yeah, absolutely.
How has that belief, your belief that the direct market is dead and that retailer is the one that killed it, has that become only more entrenched in this time? Because it's been interesting. I feel like I talk to retailers all the time. I've been writing about comics for like 11 years. I've been going to the same comic shop for 30 years. I've never seen a time where it seems like the beliefs amongst the retailer set are more divisive. And maybe I'm wrong about that.
See, and this is the crux of why that piece that I wrote has to be, and I'm a pretty hyperbolic guy. That piece has to be one of the most hyperbolic things I ever wrote. The whole point of it was to piss people off.
Sure.
This was Gary Groth level, just trolling at Comics Pro, the people who think they care the most about comics. They don't. They care the most about the comics industry. Are being told that they're at fault, and it's ridiculous. So first off, it wasn't really handed out. Multiple people told me they would print it and hand it out. One person printed 2 copies.
Oh, okay.
Gave it to like 3 different
Why did
people.
TCJ say that then? I don't get that. That's weird.
Because when TCJ agreed to run it, it was multiple people told me they would hand it out.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
It was it was put up in advance.
Sure.
So we just didn't know. My friend told me, he goes, I handed out 3. And I checked with other people. Like, I didn't know. I didn't even print it, man. I forgot. Sorry. I was late.
Yeah. It happens.
The simple fact is that there are so few retailers talking. Comics Pro boasts something like 2,000 members, not 2,000 stores. It's about 400 or 500 stores for Comics Pro.
And even less at the summit. I've been to the summit. I went to it in Portland.
It's a quarter of the industry, counting only the direct market diamond people.
Right.
Like, who cares what they have to say? I mean, they're very good people and they're well-meaning and they're trying to do things, but they're trying to do things for the comic industry.
Right.
You're not just beating a dead horse. You're breaking the ribs off of like a desert, a desert skeleton. It's been picked clean.
Mm-hmm.
You're chasing it because you happen to be one of the scavengers who got into the marrow.
Right.
And you're still okay.
This is a dark metaphor.
But that's what the comic industry is.
Sure.
The comic industry is currently selling Well, Hickman really threw things for a loop for a little while.
Because people like single issues too much for a time?
No, because he was doing what should be done. He told new, interesting stories. He got people on board. I don't like the weekly schedule for House and Powers.
Right.
I had new people walking into my shop going, "There's a thing coming out with X-Men that I might want to buy." And these were not. I don't mean people who knew comics. I had some people who knew comics picked up in advance, or I had some people who couldn't get it at their store. But I had literally total like kids walking in.
Right.
And pick. I'm all for it. I stocked it heavily. I still have quite a few issues because I believed in it too much. He did what's right, but then Marvel fucked everyone by creating a ridiculous shipping schedule and crowding out tons and tons of comics.
Wait, with the ridiculous shipping schedule, are you talking about with the Dawn of X stuff, or are you talking about with House of X and...
Dawn of X.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I still think House and Powers would have fundamentally changed the conversation if given a year to sell.
Yeah.
I think they would have grown and grown and grown until they were a 90s level hit.
Right.
But no one has the patience for that anymore. Fine. But then to just show your greedy underbelly right away. In the line of stuff that Hickman was believing in, like he still was saying, these 5 are gonna, and then after the success of that, we announced 4 or 5 books that are having 4-issue miniseries. Now again, I love when Marvel does this because really quality comic books come out of this. Like right now, their obsession with Marvels, we got a Kurt Busiek drawn Avengers issue 6 era story.
I hope it's not drawn by him.
Kurt Busiek written, Steve Rude drawn story. We got that out of all their garbage they're making. We got that Jerry Ordway Namor story. Fantastic stuff. But that's because they're flooding the market with anything that people might have a slight interest in.
Mm-hmm.
And Death Row's move long before the pandemic. The thing is that I said this, I am not a sports guy.
Oh, I am.
My manager, and he said it's the greatest sports metaphor I have ever made. They are, the comic industry, Marvel and DC, are creating just enough Hail Mary pass wins.
Oh, sure.
To never get a good draft pick. They're not making it to the playoffs. They're not making it to the finals. They're getting through the playoffs a little bit, and then they fall again, and they never recover.
Well, I mean, it's like DC's thing was that, every time things start getting dicey after New 52, they're like, oh, we'll do a rebirth, or, we'll do whatever 5G is. And it's like, that'll solve our problems. And because it resets the counter at a high level, and then it goes from there. But I mean, I guess, like, and I hate trying to push you to the industry side instead of the comic side, because I know you prefer the comic side. But I mean, going back to it though, I mean, like, how do you feel like, do you, obviously any time there's a pandemic like this where everyone's like locked at their houses and everything like that, or can't go to their shops and stuff, is going to be a weird as hell time. But
oh, absolutely.
I mean, do you feel like it has been a little bit more divisive than usual amongst?
Oh, look, I think my point is just that the voices who I see on the internet, I see 100 retailers and in some retailer groups, 200. So I don't know how the industry is reacting.
Sure.
I know that when DC launched this DCBS,
Midtown
comic
thing
nonsense, I saw 15% of comic people like, no, yeah, I can sell books. It's good. I'll get it. And the rest not. There's this local store here that I like very much. I used to shop there, but I don't anymore since I opened mine. They sent out an email. They didn't say DCBS. They didn't say anything. They just said, we have new DC books coming in. You've ordered them. Let us know. They're not in this controversy. They're selling whatever they're selling. And they've always been like that. So I think that the voices that have been talking for a very long time are in an uproar. I don't know if they're that. If you go, there's a lot of secret retailer groups. I only belong to 2. I'm really not
a secret retailer group guy.
Yeah, no, I'm not a group guy in general.
Sure.
But I'm also like, I don't have time. I take things personally, so I don't have time to get caught up in the drama that happens in a lot of these places. Yeah. One, because publishers are involved.
Mm-hmm.
There's a decent amount of publishers there, and the other because it's people who I know personally. It's a pretty tiny group, and it's literally, hey, who needs this? Who has that?
Yeah.
So I'm not really seeing a lot of people. Non-hyperbolic versions of my article have come out from Chuck Krasinski, Brian Hibbs, and Joe Field in the last year since I put it out.
Yeah.
You know,
Very different messaging, though. I mean, it's like it's kind of like the community versus like you in the documentary where you didn't have any of the community parts, but you said all the supporting arguments for it. Like they're saying yours minus like the comic market is dead thing. I mean, like you read Tilting at Windmills.
They define themselves as the comic market.
What's that?
Because they define themselves as the comic market.
Yeah.
Because they don't see Target or the bookstores or the internet as in the same business as them.
I think one of the interesting things about all this is like, I guess it's interesting because this goes back to your 3 levels thing, where It's like, I feel like the reason
that's why I introduced them in the beginning.
What's that?
That's why I introduced them in the beginning because it saves a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
We're trying to understand what we're talking about.
But the interesting thing is like you talked about that shop that's near you that had the DC books. Here's the thing. I'm going to be totally honest. Comic fans don't give a shit about who is the distributor.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, like if I go
let's get into nowadays. Let's get into what's going on right now then. You want to talk about the pandemic and calling the pandemic, and this is a perfect jump on point. I don't blame this store at all. I don't blame anyone getting this stuff. I blame DC. These books shouldn't be out. That's the problem. The problem inherent in all of this, and the reason why are retailers blowing up over DC putting out 5 books? I mean, I'm sure you've seen this, like you follow comics. They were supposed to put 15 books out this week at all sorts of stores.
Yeah.
And 10 of them aren't coming.
Right. Dollhouse Family 6 is coming though, so I'm happy. Sorry, I really love Dollhouse Family. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and that's my whole point is the pandemic is not a thing that's in brackets yet. It's not. Then there was a pandemic. Is the pandemic? It's going on. Marvel was caught off balance when clearly when being told, oh, we're going to start shipping books. Diamond told them we're going to start shipping books. Marvel, what? You're going to what now? You want us to put together a schedule?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, we're not going to be ready May 20th.
It's a very interesting schedule they put together.
There's a pandemic. Like they're looking at Diamond. They're like, there's a pandemic on, right, guys? Can you imagine Marvel Studios going, we're putting Black Widow out. A bunch of states opened up. We're just putting it out. States that can see it can see it. Everyone else, whatever. You'll figure it out.
They wouldn't say it, but Christopher Nolan would.
Christopher Nolan would, sure.
Yeah, he really wants Tenet to come out. Really wants Tenet to come out.
He also doesn't believe that films belong on anything smaller than like 90 inches.
Right, and he also is shooting like what is it? I'm trying to remember what type of film he uses. I mean, he's always like, he's a theater guy. He's a theater guy.
Yeah, he's a theater guy, and I feel that. But I was just saying, the whole, I don't know if it's DC's fault. I don't know. Again, everyone has to make their own decisions, and Diamond probably has monetary reasons as well.
Right.
But the reason retailers are freaking out is because they don't know what to do. And we were at a point where we went, look, we don't know what to do, so we're pausing.
Yeah, I mean,
it's all figuring it out.
Right. But I mean, here's the thing that I think is really interesting is it's like, I guess, we're in a situation, there's no such thing as a perfect answer. There's no way you could ever come up with a perfect answer. And to me, it's like, I've talked to a lot of shops that are like, I need new comics to come out. Like, I need them to come out. And it's interesting because it's like, at a certain point, like look at Ryan Higgins in the Bay Area. Ryan Higgins, what's that? You'd rather not. But I mean, he's interesting because he's closed, but he still wants DC books. He still wants those coming out. And like you talk to like Steve Anderson at Third Eye, and Third Eye wants those. They can sell books, and they're going to sell those books.
I can sell books.
Yeah. But I mean, it's like, I guess like I don't know what the perfect answer is, and like to a certain degree, and I actually believe me, the last thing that DC probably would ever expect from me is me to write a positive about DC article.
Look, here's my problem. Those people you just mentioned,
mm-hmm.
and never say Third Eye is just in it for the comic industry. Third Eye is in it for the comics. Ryan seems to love comics overall. These guys, they're not thinking in the interest of their stores in the long term, because they might not have a long term if they don't do this. They're being forced to think short term.
Right.
And that sucks. We all have to think short term. I can't go against their judgments. But if DC wasn't offering them this, they'd be doing some other sort of short term decision.
Right.
They would do something else. And they wouldn't be putting pressure on other people who aren't ready to do this.
Right. Right.
But again, I don't think it's them. I don't think that when the DC survey went out and asked us if we want comics, and they went, fuck down, give me comics, give me comics, give me comics. They went, I could sell comics if they came. I wrote, I could sell comics if they came. I said, I don't think they should. But DC looked at it.
What does that mean for Wednesday for you?
I have hold list comics coming, but especially with the 40 books that weren't shipped, some of my customers have one book.
Yeah. Not much of a hold list.
I had the Bog Bodies book plate coming. That was going to be, hey, we have Bog Bodies and you can pick up your hold. And we do curbside. We're doing curbside with longer hours on Wednesday than we've done for any of the other days of the pandemic. But now without Bog Bodies coming, I'm just pushing that to next week.
Right.
I can absorb the $400 diamond bill. There's so little coming. I can absorb that bill and sell some books to the hardcores who definitely want. But I've been selling books to the hardcores who want comics who are not Wednesday warriors for the last 2 months.
Yeah, yeah.
They need things to read, and there's tons of comics out there. And if Third Eye would have to be forced to go dig in the back and find all their totally awesome zines that they have and put together amazing bundles with dead stock, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
Mm-hmm. I mean, so I mentioned, I think it was before we started recording, I talked about Katie Proctor from Books with Pictures.
Katie's
just, I mean, killing it. I mean, like so here's the funny thing. This is like,
I don't have words when I think of her. She's an exceptional retailer.
So I bought, my wife doesn't, I mentioned before, my wife doesn't read comics.
Right.
But Katie's doing this personal shopping thing.
Sure. And that I told her to send that form to the ABA.
Yeah, well, so here's the thing. So I filled out that form and I wanted to get my wife some comics, right? And I do the whole form, and like I mean, if I showed you my room, you would think there's like 0% chance that Katie could provide a box of comics that I own none of them.
I believe in Katie.
Katie provided a box of comics that I didn't own a single one of, all for my wife, that like perfectly fit her interests, which is amazing.
I want some titles.
Well, okay, I don't have them right on me, but like there was, one of them was like the Al Ewing Doctor Who book, because my wife likes Doctor Who. There's this one that was like a continuation of a book series that my wife likes that she didn't even know my wife likes. It was like somehow like based off all these different things she came up with. Incredibly, she came up with Cosmic Ghost Rider, like the Baby Thanos Must Die or whatever it was, the Donny Cates one, and I'm trying to remember what else. There was like 3 other books, but like all this stuff, like when my wife looked at it, she was like super interested.
I wish we had video just for how big I'm grinning. Katie is just, she's exceptional.
But I mean, I think that's really interesting because she's managed to commodify her deeper stock in a way that has been really interesting. Like you're talking about Steve with the zine stuff.
Everyone should be doing.
Right.
There's not a store that isn't sitting on tons of stock.
So this ties into something I told Heidi McDonald, where Heidi was saying something along the lines of like, oh, comics are on hold because there's no new comics coming out. And I hate to sound like 90s NBC, but the thing is like, there's always new comics to you. Like I ordered from Comics Dungeon.
Ooh,
what's that?
Forget that. I love Heidi, but she's part of the problem. She's talking about the comics industry like it's comics. Just forget all the great digital stuff that's out there.
Right.
Forget everything on Webtoons. One of my customers just launched his webcomic that he wasn't going to launch for a while because of the pandemic. Right. Forget that. First Second had new books.
Hell yeah. They did.
DC, YA, and Ink and Zoom, whatever they're called now, they had new books. There are tons of new books. Comics aren't on hold.
Yeah.
Diamond put a pause on their distribution. That's not comics. That's not all comic books. And the more you push that agenda, the more you shrink your community. The more you make people who believe that comics are only Wednesday tell people who don't know any better that there's nothing new for them to read. Dragon Boots came out during the pandemic.
Hell yeah, it did. It's the
best.
That's
Eugene Yang's book. It should be lauded. It should be spoken throughout the land. And instead, there's articles about how Rob Liefeld did a picture that helped people, which is awesome because Rob's a great guy. But like, we're talking about that. There's a Gene Yang book. Gene sent me and 4 other stores signed book plates just from it via Instagram. And we're talking about comics being on hold when literally the man who was at the UN representing comics as the ambassador for literature put out his first new book in 7 years that discusses the mythos of Superman and ties into a new book he just worked on for Superman, in case you like superheroes.
Right.
And is about an all-American sport invented in America. And you're going, well, I got nothing to sell. Fuck you. Ridiculous.
So I do want to say, though, I wasn't even specifically talking about new comics coming out. I mean, the thing is like,
well, that's what I mean. I'm just saying, but there is new stuff.
Yeah, there is new stuff coming out. I mean, believe me,
well,
like I First Second is my favorite publisher. I love First Second, and like I get the advances. Like I got the new Box Brown book, and the new Box Brown book.
Oh, Child Star.
It's good, and it's also really sad.
Terrifying.
Yeah. But anyways, but the thing is like everything I've ordered, like I've ordered stuff from a number of shops from around the country, just trying to support, people I'm friendly with and everything like that. And like, it's a whole bunch of stuff I might not have read otherwise, but I got them because I was like, oh, this is an opportunity to read stuff that I wouldn't otherwise. So I read Check Please, and I read Outer Darkness, and I read the latest volume of The Weatherman, and I read, like a whole bunch of First Second stuff, and, going through all this stuff. And
why reading other things? Why aren't you reading those all the time?
Well, I already, dude, seriously, like you would not, like my nightstand is basically all books.
If anyone would believe you. if no, seriously, I speak to other retailers. They blow my mind because every Tuesday they're reading a stack like this that I won't go near.
Right.
I'll read that stack in the next like month and a half worth of comics will be that much for me. But I'm reading ARCs, old comics, new comic. I'm reading comics. It's disgusting. Like it's shocking to me how many comics I read. And I love reading comics. Like I totally believe you that you have more to read. My point is, what are you reading that's better than some of that stuff?
Well, I mean, here's the thing though, is like, I think we're in a time where, like, in terms of entertainment, period, there's such a volume of it that it's just impossible to keep up with all the good stuff. Like, you look at TV.
That's a fair point. You're going every week, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's just so much. I mean, like, I could read through my comics in here and never have to have Netflix or anything ever again. I already read all of them.
We're at a peak time. There's amazing, even all this thing, like I said, stuff Marvel's doing for one shots. Some of these ongoing series that people are not even. Black Cat. The Travel Foreman issues, at least, that is a really fun book.
The first issue was great. I haven't read anything since then, but I mean,
I have a customer who's so into it. I started like, if we had a damaged copy, I'll read it. So I've read every few issues, and then Chris Anka just did 2 issues.
But I kind of feel like, to a certain degree, because of the volume of books, it's kind of like, there's people who watch TV who will say until like they die that Terriers was treated horribly, and it was like a great all-time classic show that only had 1 season. Like, for me, I'm all about like Kaiju Max, or like, I love like a comic that I rep for forever is like, everyone loves Giant Days, but why doesn't everyone read Bad Machinery? Which is,
Don't get me started.
Yeah, man, I'm all about.
Why doesn't everyone read the whole Scary Go Round archive?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, you're talking about all these different books, but the thing is it's like, there's a lot of times, I mean, it's just like, it's like my nephew texts me all the time. He's like, oh, have you watched Legend of Korra? And I was like, I know I haven't watched Legend of Korra. I'm like, there's so much to watch.
Oh, okay. Look, I made myself so happy when a couple years ago I stopped telling people I was going to watch things.
Oh yeah, no, I told him that. I told him, and he was not happy with me. I was just like, I'm gonna be real with you, man. I am like watching all of Clone Wars and Rebels right now because I've never seen those shows, and I love them. But like, I don't have time. Like, I have my day job. I have like Sketched. I have my podcast. I have like,
and reading comic books
and like existing
more.
Yeah, and so
that's part of the issue with the argument. Comics are always seen as a secondary medium, even by the people who read them. People will go pick up their not everyone.
Right.
Everyone. People go pick up their comics before a Marvel movie, and they could read those comics in the hour they wait, and they put them aside just to talk about how excited they are for the Marvel movie. I'm not putting those people down or the Marvel movie down at all, but a lot of what people read comics for, they're getting in these Marvel movies anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it is certainly. I mean, that's the thing that I think a lot of times people talk about how why aren't more of the movie viewers watching? It's like because it's an adequate replacement for the superhero comics. Like, I mean,
More than a quick replacement when all they have to know is a bunch of movies with really fun special effects, and they can all their friends will tell them which ones they can skip. Try doing that with comics.
yeah, yeah. I brought this up like a million times, but like the first time I ever went to my local comic shop with my wife, she looked at the totality of it and was like, "How do you know where to start?" And I was like, "I don't know. I just know."
So I have a great. My wife and I were reading Why the Last Man in trade paperback in like 2006. Our library had them, right? And we got to new releases, and they had volume 4. And my wife read it, and she goes, "All right, so it's like once a year, like Harry Potter?" And I'm like, no. The issues have to come out, then they get collected, and then they will go into this, assuming they continue the series. She goes, "What do you mean the issues?" And I'm like, "The single issues of this comic." And I open it up, I show her the indices, it contains issue 20 through. She goes, "They still make single issue comics?"
Yeah.
Like this is someone married to me, but like I read graphic novels. We were just married. I was poor. I wasn't buying that many graphic novels. Certainly wasn't getting single issues off the shelf. And I'm like, yeah. She goes, "So you said they come out a few months, they collect this. That means this is old." I'm like, yeah. She goes, "So how many new issues were there?" This is 2006. The internet's not as easy. It takes a few minutes. I'm like, "There's like 3 more issues." She goes, "And there's somewhere we could buy those?" She's a story junkie. And we drive to the local comic shop and pick stuff up. We would get there, and I would have however long to look around that it took her to read Why the Last Man to see what was out there. And it's in a lot of stories. I had a lot of bad stuff trying to get help from those people. But like, all she needed was to know that you could get this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And she wanted it. But then there's the access point. How do you get this stuff? How do you get into it? What do you need? I have people come into my store because I'm the guy, and they'll say, "Okay, tell him what he should read."
Well, I mean, so that goes back to the personalization thing of like having people that know what they're talking about. Because if I mean, okay, so I told you before that I had my 3-year gap where I stopped reading comics. When I came back to reading comics, I went into the comic shop and I had no idea what to buy because I'd been not reading comics for 3 years. And so the clerk in my shop, Bosco's Comics in Anchorage, Alaska, he asked me what I like, and I told him the last thing I read was Preacher, and I loved it. It was like I stopped reading with the final issue of Preacher, and that was it. And so he gave me the first trade for Why the Last Man, the first trade for Fables, and the first trade for The Walking Dead. And so I was on board from the jump. And I have, the funny thing is, going back to book plates, this is kind of funny. I have all of Why the Last Man in a combination of, I got to issue like I don't remember what trade it was, but like the whatever ends with like about 41. And then I started buying single issues with issue 42, which was the ampersand issue, which remains to this day my favorite issue.
Oh, it's such an issue.
It's so good. But anyways, the funny thing is I have all the trades, and then right after the series ended, right after the final trade came out, I think it was Isotope Comics had a signing with Brian K. Vaughan and Pia Guerra. And they did a book plate for that where it was the characters playing roller derby, and they signed them. I bought all of the trades again just so I could have the book plate version. And then I eventually gave away all my single volumes.
Yeah, mine, I mean, I'm terrible about keeping and storing my comics. Mine are in a box somewhere. They're half trades and then single issues. They're like, we just jumped into it. And that's because I knew enough about how comics, again, come out to stores already.
Right. Well, I mean, you can see a bit, like you can see my setup, like, yeah, a little bit.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. That's, if I had set up nicely, I'm overwhelmed. That's like, I'm.
You probably have like way more comics than I do, so I totally get it. But
I try to get rid of as many as possible. But the thing that's really, that sticks in everything we're saying is, first off, with the pandemic, you have very little chance for that, except that the commodity that Katie and I and a lot of others sell is now in higher demand.
Mm-hmm.
So it's able to shift that focus. But the second thing that you have is that you have the world sort of coming to a point where I think people are starting to commodify what's important to them. So I think there's also a lot of support going into comic shops right now because the comic shop is important to these people.
Right.
There's a lot of comic shops that don't have new stuff to sell right now, that are not having trouble because of Bink, big customers buying gift cards, people forcing them to sell them stuff that's old to keep them going. And that's exactly what they've been fostering all these years. You know, you said you're having the years to get it. They've fostered enough people who care about just that they exist to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great. But the simple fact is 2 months from now, we could all be ordered under federal law to not leave our house at all because it didn't work.
Right.
And every major urban center is constantly pushing back their lockdown. New York just did it again.
Mm-hmm.
So someone I know said, I don't get it. How long are they going to string people along? And I said later to my wife, not to this person, they're not stringing us along. The real thing is that we're in a pandemic. We're in lockdown for the next 6 months unless we hear otherwise. That's really what the situation is. It's irresponsible to force stores that are finding their way through this totally crazy time to try and return to the old ways. Who's doing it? Who's responsible? I don't know. And there are stores that want that. So make New to You Wednesday.
Yeah, they did. Kind of.
Yeah. You know, do a read along. Diamond needs product to sell. Okay, Diamond, how about you unlock the pandemic restrictions you made where they're only doing direct ship orders that cost us an arm and a leg to send, and start doing a weekly delivery of whatever stock's in the place and let companies make sales. Like Diamond could be making much more money than they're making if they needed to.
Right.
So where the future of comics is, they're headed for some sort of insane Ahab's final from hell's heart I plunge at the attempt in the middle of a fucking pandemic. Like I don't know what are they doing? You know what I mean? Like I can't even. I used to be able to say that in the next 2 or 3 years, the single issue market will be indescribable. It has to. It's shifting so much with these online places with their collectible covers that are boosting numbers on books that no one cares about.
Right.
That's coming to a head anytime soon because it's starting to backfire. Marvel's now putting 7 or 8 covers that you can put custom covers on instead of the 3 or 4. So clearly they're not getting the returns they used to.
I mean, I think that's one of my, like, we talked before about how there are actually positive, like, before we start recording, about how there's, like, positive things that have come from this. Like, you know, you were talking about how you like doing video stuff. That's awesome. But I do kind of worry that the takeaway from this pandemic is that in the comics market and the comics industry is that we should just keep doing things the same way.
Yes, and that is why I am like, I'm not supportive of this, but I'm really just sitting back and watching. Right. Because that should never be a takeaway in the comics market, because it's such a bad idea to continue doing things the way they've been doing them anyway.
Things should not be the same as 1988 or 1998. It's 2020.
Compare the numbers. I had someone compare the numbers. He goes, 2004. He said, I'm going to 2004. He gave me numbers. And I went to Comic-Con, I looked them up, and he's absolutely right that the top 20 books sold a lot more.
Right.
But the top 10 book was still like under 300,000.
Mm-hmm.
If those are your numbers with what paper costs nowadays, not pre-pandemic, you're talking about not me. And those are comics that cost $1.99 and $2.99. You're like, it just doesn't. It's not translatable. It's a whole other world. So I don't have a fear that we're going to come back, because I don't believe that what's happening right now is the comeback. Like it's
a perfect time.
Yeah,
we're gonna do it. Okay, wait, really quick. Last thing we're gonna talk about. It's not even maybe. Who knows? Diamond has an effort right now that they're calling Back the Comeback.
Oh, yeah.
You have your own return, which you like. You said this in your Facebook video. You like naming things after songs. So you chose Don't Call It a Comeback from Mama Said Knock You Out by LL Cool J. Great lyric, great song. I don't think you're going to have any pandemic era collectibles as part of it. Maybe. I don't know. So why was, I mean, you had to guess that people would see that and be like, oh, he's taking the piss. He's coming.
Also, keep in mind, if you go back through my Twitter,
I know
7 years ago, I was much nastier and much more intense about how fucked up this all is.
Yeah.
Really lessened my tone. What happened was I thought about how dismissive it is to the work that all these comic retailers are doing.
Right.
We're working our asses off. We're making a third of what we can make for 10 times the amount of work. Sometimes under the dire circumstances of being kicked out of our stores if we don't make rent while we can't actually go to our stores. Like there's, and Diamond's being like, I hope you guys had a nice vacation.
Yeah. I'm sure Katie Proctor is feeling like she's had a really nice, like, 2-month vacation.
Yeah. Well, Katie's killing it. She can at least make her payroll.
Right.
From this and feel successful. You have people who are down in the dumps who don't know what's going to happen with their store, who are relying on charity money.
Right.
And you're saying, well, we're going to give a little bit of money from this product to that charity because we're forcing you to sell stuff.
Mm-hmm. Don't worry, they're tweeting about it too. It's cool.
Yeah. It's all panic. It's all them doing stuff at this panic pace for whatever reason, whether DC forced them, whether they are forcing it. They're not being in any way thoughtful in what they're doing. Mm-hmm. So it needs to be ignored. Like but then it got stuck in my head, that lyric and that how perfect it is for the fact that we were never going. We just have some new books. We just have more stuff coming in. You're one of my 15 or 20 customers who cared to get his weekly stuff on Wednesday. We'll have some stuff. I had a customer ask me picking up Sandman, which he's reading. So do I have books? I'm like, dude, I got the invoice. There's so little on there. I don't even know. And he goes, you'll tell me? And I'm like, honestly, if you have an issue or two, will you come? He goes, no, I got lots to read. I'm like, right. So Bog Bodies is next week. If you have an issue, if you have more than an issue or two in this new week, I'll let you know on Monday, but do you really, you wouldn't come for less? He goes, no, because why would he? Almost no one is coming out except that you've bred this ultra collector who's now going to come out because people aren't coming out to get these books that no one can find.
One thing I think is interesting about all this is, like, I do really like the community aspect of comic shops. Like, I worked in my comic shop when I was 15 in the sports cards department, hilariously enough. And my boss, that was my boss then, still runs the sports cards shop there, or department there. And then there's people that I'm friendly with from the shop. So when I go there, it's like I walk in, they're like, "Oh, what's up, Harper?" I'm friendly with them. I miss that aspect of it. At the same time, I ain't going in there anytime soon.
Right. That's my point. What Diamond is forcing you to do is, if you want your new books, to go there without that experience.
Right. The curbside pickup, which is not really the same.
Curbside pickup, or go into, if you're in Vegas or Texas, a place with tape on the line, with sanctimonious signs everywhere telling you to wear a mask, which I'm wearing a mask. I don't need 50 signs all over the store. Like,
some people do. Some people, not that they're going to listen. But
I'm very on the fence. A lot of stores I know that are just doing curbside are putting up signs to wear a mask. And I'm like, I mean, look, we're in a pretty bad area, Long Island, so no one's really flaunting the mask rule. There were some idiots doing a protest, but the average person walking down the street is not. Need reminders when we have a hospital overloaded.
Right.
A mile. Being in New York, it's just, it's a little different. But the simple fact is that what Diamond is again, unwittingly, I don't know, forcing people to do is to divorce the comics they're picking up from that wonderful experience and have going to the comic shop. So how's that going to help? My customers are literally hanging out 6 feet from me. I hand them a bag and they're trying to talk to me in the street to BS, and to have a nice time. It doesn't work. It's awkward and weird.
Yeah.
So I can get better at it, sure, but it's never going to be the same experience.
Yeah. Well, and you also don't want to put yourself at harm's way for that.
But I'm saying, let's just talk what it's doing to let's stop talking about fans and retail, to your customer. You're a store, you have a customer, and their grocery store is a hell trip. They're getting more and more things from Amazon. This is one of the few retail things they do for pleasure. And you're forcing them to put a mask on, to go out and pick up the books, stand somewhere, call ahead, get the book, walk away. You have to love comics like me for that to really not bum you out.
You got to be a comics lover and not one of those other ones.
One of those people who's coming for the community.
Yeah.
And as a comics lover, I ain't coming out for 2 books. I'll come in a month. How many books will be out in a month? Oh, I'll have like 8 books. Let's say usually I have 30. 8 books, I'll come out then. Okay, that's great. We push that at my store. It's why we push the hold list. You only have to come once a month. And then we can have a hour-long chat like some of my customers like.
DC put me in a tough position because, like I said, I love
There's one
Dollhouse
book that
Family.
you really want.
I know, it's horrible. It's terrible. I do really love that comic, though.
No,
Anyways, well, okay, well, I'm
I
really
think we
glad.
need a part 2 is really what it goes to.
What's that?
I think we need a part 2 is what it boils down to.
That's the thing with all my guests. I remember I had John Paul
Sure.
Leon.
Yeah.
I had John Paul Leon on, and he was at the end of it. He was like, we could keep going, right? And I was like, I don't have the podcast stamina you do, JP.
Yeah, absolutely. I have people who have done signings, and recently we redid our basement. That's where I am. We've had a few guests sleep here, and those are very late nights.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I've been with one of them.
Everybody, that goes back to the community, though. It's like everybody who like loves top level comics, they can just talk about it forever.
I have a lot of people whose work I currently do not enjoy, and whose business decisions and what they've put out, I think, are like beyond my understanding. I could talk to them about comics for hours. We have great talk, but because I don't go to lots of conventions, like I don't have that relationship with them on the level that a lot of other people do, a lot of other retailers and people in comics, because I don't do that all the time. And I think it also allows me to remember that again, we mentioned Ngozi, like that, there's a fan base there for someone.
An incredible fan base.
Not going to 99% of the comic things. She's got the biggest conventions at a ticketed booth, and she's, I think SPX honored her years ago before the second thing. She went to that, and she goes to ALA conferences. She got like Raina Telgemeier, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
There's people out there, and we forget about it when we are in that insular little community. When we're at San Diego and palling it up and talking to editors who, are our friends, we forget that those people are editors of books that 30,000 people are reading.
Yeah. I wish you can't see all the art on my walls probably, but I am
right behind you.
What's that?
Flight. I see Flight.
Yeah, that's a cover from Flight Volume 1. I have a cover from
the original?
Oh, no, print. And I have a print from Flight Volume 4. That one with the girl is James Jean, because I flip and love James Jean. I don't know. I mean, it's just like I do. I just
my art that's in my living right now. Only art that I have that is here is this is just a little thank you from Marion Churchland. Or something for our crystal anniversary. I ordered her shinies for my wife. Her poster of gems and a commission of my wife's favorite gems. But those are upstairs. But upstairs where my art is, there's a Scott Pilgrim page, which I bought when O'Malley was moving out of Canada at a disgustingly cheap price. Sketches from a few, webcomic people I like. And there's I've got a Malachi Ward and Matt Sheehan, Big Barda up.
Nice.
I've got a Dave Sim original. I have Natalie Nurgut, who did.
I know. I have two Natalie Nurgut pieces in my house.
Yeah. So I've got Natalie. I've got some Gerhard backgrounds. One on Gibbons Dr. Manhattan, where Gerhard did the moon Mars castle in his ridiculous style, as well as a Tim Sale where he did a Gotham in his style. Like just gorgeous stuff, because comic art is amazing and comics are amazing. And again, like I don't have a problem with people coveting and wanting the things. I'm all for it. It's really just that all stems from the great storytelling that comics can do.
Yeah.
And I think that it's not a radical idea. And I think specifically, to wrap things up, in the future of the pandemic, that's going to be the sales leader. My friend Carl, he's doing this wonderful thing. He actually he overdid it. He works for Poison Control, which is now COVID hotline. So he's got lots of extra hours, and he's putting some of the money from extra hours to buy dead stock from comic shops. And he's doing he did a COVID-19 challenge. You can see it on YouTube, of reading random dead stock. And it killed him. It absolutely killed him, because he was reading old 80s and 70s stuff from a couple stores. But I and a few other stores sent him recent stuff that's dead, that no one's buying. And it destroyed his brain. He can't. It's literally the stuff that you couldn't sell. but that's good enough that we thought could sell, not the stuff that's like so bad that no one even really reads it. We're not going Tara, Witch of the Black Rose here. We're these are pretty decent books, but it's just this giant stack of kind of pretty decent books, second issue.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm not doing that anymore. I want to keep supporting comic shops, but I don't know what I'll buy from them for a while. I can't even read any comics. And that's going to happen as people are buying just to escape, just to read, and less collectability and less of that community stuff. But what that means for comic shops, what that means for comic publishers is all up in the air. Because comic shops, like I said, they have that support. You should have seen the ABA, American Bookseller Association. They do a daily thing, reviewing stuff. So they've been talking about Bink for a while. Their write-up over Comics for Creator was literally like, holy crap, guys. Look how much money these people raised. They sure love their comic stores. Like they literally, it was $500 million in a weekend.
Yeah.
The Bink had been getting tons of money from DC, and Lionforge gave them. They made a new fund. Lionforge made a new fund, then DC made a new fund with their name on it because DC did it. Creators were doing donations already, and the money was going in. Rick Riordan matched up to $100,000, and it went in 9 minutes. So he matched it again. There was tons of money being raised, but the comic people just came out. The support is there. The ability to pivot from, again, I don't know when the pivot is the right time. It could be 6 months from now. It could be a year from now to really bring things back. But stores have a real opportunity here to look to what actually sells and what their store actually does.
Mm-hmm.
If your store is a community center and it can't survive without people coming for single issues, then maybe you need to look into opening a community center. If all the things that keep your store going are people coming to play Magic and Wednesday Warriors coming out to chat, then you're in a lot of trouble. So you need to think about what else to do, because those things aren't coming back anytime soon.
Yeah, which is why we shouldn't call it a comeback.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Those things aren't coming back.
Yeah. Well, we could get into the second part really easily. We'll do another one down the line. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about all this stuff with me.
Oh, I literally didn't even touch on half the things I thought we were going to talk about.
That's for round 2.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. I got to go face the music for being on this for much longer than I thought.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with retailer Menachem Luchins from Escape Pod Comics. You can find him on his website at escapepodcomics.com, on Escape Pod's Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and in Escape Pod Comics itself. As a heads up, Off Panel is once again brought to you by Sketch.com. Check out the new version of the site and consider subscribing for access to all of the site's content and its members-only forum. If you're a fan of Off Panel, make sure to check it out on Patreon. If you back the show in there, you not only support it, but you get early access to each week's podcast, access to weekly content, and more. Also, don't forget to subscribe to Off Panel on iTunes or Spotify and give the show a rating or review while you're at it. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by liking it on Facebook at /Sketched, that's SKTCHD, followed on Twitter at SketchComic, or following me at @SliceFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including AbductedTheComic.com, Greg Peterson, Andrew Carita, Matt Mahoney, Charlie Chu, Greg Peterson, Stephen Hall, Dan Lee, Cameron Schrader, Pensacola Pop Comics, Kim Estlin, Philip Mero, Christian Shelton, Kenny Porter, Chris Bachala, Torrin Groenbeck, Fuzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Harry Sayer, Waltz Comics and Books, Carl Mizell, Danny Ollie, Paul Slates, Akil Wilson, Alex Demetriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Troy Jeffrey Allen, Liana Kangas, Keegan Rave, Milton Lawson, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Harry Small, Alistair Ross, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Ryanwan, Vita Ayala, Aditya Bidikar, Tara Ferguson, Dave Slusher, WMQ Comics, Akil Kokachi, Phil White, Sean Pinello, Kent Heidelman, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, Nick Michelin, David Kelly, Robert Wilson IV, Nick Plato, Owen McCready, Brendan Fletcher, Gary Maloney, Jonathan Nilsson, Matthew Groom, Jason Assey, Adam Bogart, Xavier Files, Matthew Taylor, Tyler Turner, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Ira James Udaskin, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Ian Maxwell, Cliff Chang, Benjamin Chipper, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fabian, Kat McKenzie, Greg Rucka, Adam Highfill, Fiona Staples, Chris Hallren, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonacos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's theme song just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.